All right, let's go over a quick list of major Trump accomplishments. These are things that the news media is largely ignoring, and it'd be great if you knew them before you decided who you're going to vote for, because otherwise you're getting a really incomplete picture. First, he created this embargo and bankruptcy essentially on Iran. Iran is teetering on the brink, and that means that it can no longer fund those terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah against Israel and others in Yemen and elsewhere that it had been doing, in large part thanks to the Iran nuclear deal from the Obama administration that gave them billions and billions and billions of dollars, a lot of which they did not use on their own country, but they used to destabilize other countries because that's what the mullahs do. So this has been a great thing that's been accomplished by the Trump administration. Second one, China's increasingly being ostracized and isolated around the world. It's a slow process, but this is long overdue. China's been a terrible player on the world stage for decades now, really, and it's been speeding up. And their handling of the coronavirus and their allowing of flights in and out of Wuhan, direct flights in and out of Wuhan to San Francisco and Los Angeles and Seattle, while they had closed down flights from Wuhan within China, shows just what a nefarious player they are. They deserve to be isolated. They deserve to be kept away from the civilized world, really, because they haven't proven themselves to be part of it yet. And I'm talking specifically about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So let's remember, that's who's running China right now. The U.S. has cut its carbon emissions by as much or more than all of the other countries that are still abiding by, supposedly, the Paris Climate Accords. Remember, Trump pulled us out of those because those were intrusive and non-necessary. And yet, just because of American capitalist-oriented innovation, we are continuing to lower our carbon emissions as much or more so than those others that are trying to do it or say they are through different measures. Cross-border illegal immigration in the U.S. is down. This is pretty important too. We got to get this under control. This is something that gets sort of hidden with all the other constant hysteria that's being thrown out there. ISIS. Let's not forget, ISIS was a big bad bear when Trump took office. They've been bombed into dissolution. We also organized well with Iraq and other forces in the area to essentially eliminate ISIS as any sort of a threat or destabilizing influence there. Concomitantly, we've also seen that Trump has been able to bring together these peace agreements with the UAE and with Bahrain, probably others now following. These are moderate Muslim Arab regimes that have been vowing to destroy Israel over the years and decades, and now they have created totally normalized relations with Israel, and this means that they are coming towards the United States and Israel, which are two freedom-loving and free democracies. This is a tremendous thing, and the media gave it like about 5 minutes of airtime when it's done. More NATO countries are now keeping up to their promise, which, you know, all past presidents said we need to keep NATO to their promises, but they never actually did. Trump pushed them on it, and now they are. What this actually means, opposed to what you hear about Trump is making NATO weaker because he's trying to help his buddy Putin or whatever nonsense they think is going on with Putin. Actually, what you see now is aggregate expenditures on NATO defense are bigger than they were because the Germans and the French and the British and the Italians and the others are all starting to get closer to this. They're not keeping their promises, but they're getting closer. This is a good thing too. And then finally, let's just talk about the coronavirus death rates here. The death rates in the United States are very similar to, equal to, or a little better than what they are in most major European countries, with the only exception being Germany. So this idea that Trump's totally blown it and 200,000 Americans are dead because he's totally blown it, this is such nonsense. I know that most reasonable people don't believe anything like this when they read it, but the media still sort of spews it out there, and you should know that actually we're kind of right about where a lot of our British friends were. And this makes sense because nobody really knew what to expect because China covered it up. Remember, China, again, they destroyed all of the early evidence. They destroyed the early research on it. They destroyed the early examples, and they disappeared the scientists involved with it. You know, none of this needed to happen. The coronavirus never needed to leave even the Wuhan area. They could have kept it contained to there. But China is such a bad actor, we're all having to deal with it. And it turns out Trump didn't do any worse than the major European nations, probably a lot better than some others too. So these are just a few of the reasons you might want to consider voting for a president who now actually has 4 years of successes while being fought at every step of the way in unprecedented fashion.